Far away from Earth, on a cold and rocky planet called Ashvara Prime, lived a proud and powerful alien species known as the Skyborn. They were giant dragon-like beings, with wings as wide as starships and scales that shimmered like crystals. In the light, among them, one dragon was different. Her name was Vaishari, and her scales were not golden or black like the others. They were pale, icy white. Vaishari was born with bright red eyes and albino skin. From the day she hatched, the others whispered about her. Some were afraid of her strange color. Others believed she brought bad luck. But the worst part for Vaishari was something no one could see on the outside. She was infertile. In Skyborn society, being able to lay eggs was a sign of strength, pride, and honor. The mothers passed down their wisdom, and the fathers trained the young. But Vaishari could never have children. When the elders discovered this, they called her the Hollow One. No matter how sharp her claws or how fierce her flames, her tribe believed she was broken. As the years passed, Vaishari became stronger than most. She could outfly, outfight, and outsmart many of her kind, but none of that mattered to the tribe. Every time she returned from battle or brought food back from the stars, they turned away. No one spoke to her, no one praised her, and no one would stand beside her. Eventually, the elders made a cruel decision. They cast her out. "You bring no future to us," they said. "You are powerful, but your power ends with you. Go where you wish, but you are not one of us." Without a home, without family, and with no purpose, Vaishari flew into the stars. She flew through asteroid storms, across empty planets, and through dangerous battle zones. She slept in silent caves and fed on whatever she could find. Sometimes, she scared away pirate ships just by showing her face. Other times, she let them attack, only to show them what a mistake they had made. Years passed. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't need to. Her heart had grown cold and silent, like the far side of the moon. She didn't hate others, but she trusted no one. Until the day she was shot down. It happened near the edge of a human colony zone, an area where humans had built small cities on new planets. Vaishari had entered the area by accident. A warning system from an old satellite mistook her for a threat. Within seconds, defense turrets fired beams of energy across the sky. One blast hit her wing, then another hit her side. With a loud roar, Vaishari spiraled downward. She tried to control her fall, but the pain was too strong. She crashed into a wide canyon, breaking trees and rocks as she landed. Her body was bruised. Her wing was torn. Her energy was low. For the first time in years, she felt something close to fear. She closed her eyes and waited. Maybe this was how it would end, alone, far from her people, rejected and forgotten. But someone had seen her fall. On the nearby colony base, a young human medic named Jonas was working in his field tent. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't carry weapons. He carried medicine, tools, and a bag full of hope. He had joined the Galactic Peace Corps to help any people, no matter what planet they came from. When reports came in about a giant alien beast crashing into the canyon, most people panicked. The security teams wanted to send drones. Some even said they should call for airstrikes. But Jonas asked a simple question. Did anyone check if it was injured? No one had. They were too afraid. So Jonas packed his medical kit, hopped on a speeder bike, and headed toward the canyon alone. The sight of Vaishari took his breath away. She was huge, longer than a ship, with wings spread across the rocks and steam rising from her nostrils. Her scales looked like snow under moonlight. One of her horns was chipped. Blood stained her side, but her eyes were still glowing. Watching every move, Jonas slowed down and raised both hands. He didn't come to fight. He came to help. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said calmly. "You're injured. I can help." Vaishari growled, a low, deep sound. She could end him with a single breath, but she didn't. She was too tired, too weak, and for some reason, his voice didn't sound like fear. It sounded honest. Jonas moved slowly, placing his tools down one by one. He scanned her wounds using a small handheld device. The cuts were deep, but not fatal. Her wing, however, was badly torn. Without help, she wouldn't fly again. He worked all day, cleaning the wounds, applying healing gel, and wrapping her wing with a flexible band. Vaishari didn't speak, but she never took her eyes off him. By nightfall, she finally lowered her head and rested it on the ground. Jonas sat nearby, watching the stars. "I don't know if you understand me," he said softly, "but you're not alone anymore." Vaishari didn't reply, but she didn't leave either. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her not as a threat, not as a curse, but as someone worth saving. And deep in her silent heart, something long forgotten began to stir. The next morning, the canyon was quiet. The wind moved through the trees. Birds flew above. And in the middle of broken rocks lay a giant creature with snow-colored scales, still resting. Vaishari opened her eyes slowly. Her body ached. Her wing was stiff, but the pain was dull now, not sharp like before. She turned her head slightly and saw something strange. The human was still there. He had not run away. He had not brought weapons. He had made a small camp nearby. A small fire warmed. A cooking pot. The smell of food drifted in the air. The human sat quietly beside it, writing notes in a small device. Jonas looked up and gave a small smile. "Good morning," he said, even though he knew she didn't understand. Vaishari watched him carefully. She had seen many humans before. Most ran, some screamed, and a few tried to shoot. But this one was different. He was calm, quiet, and kind. Jonas stood slowly and walked toward her, hands open. He stopped a few feet away and pointed to her bandaged wing, still holding up. He asked softly. Vaishari didn't move, but she didn't growl either. He reached into his bag and took out a small device. It glowed softly and made a humming sound. He pointed it at her wing and checked the readings. "Better than I hoped," he said with a nod. She blinked once. She didn't understand the words, but she felt something in his voice. Peace. Over the next few days, Jonas stayed near the canyon. He sent reports to the colony, saying the creature was stable and not a threat. The commanders were unsure, but they trusted Jonas. He had helped many strange beings before. Each day, Jonas cleaned Vaishari's wounds, checked her wing, and gave her special nutrient packs. She didn't eat the first ones to bitter, but he learned quickly and made changes using local herbs. Soon, she accepted the meals. He spoke to her often, even though she never answered. He talked about Earth, the stars, and the people he had helped. Sometimes he laughed at his own jokes. Other times he just sat quietly beside her, though they were different in every way. One human, one dragon. They shared a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. One evening, clouds rolled in. A storm was coming. Jonas looked up and frowned. "Bad weather," he said. "We should take shelter." He turned to Vaishari, unsure if she understood. She stood slowly, her large body rising like a mountain. She tested her wing, lifting it slightly, then folded it again. It was still weak. Jonas pointed toward a cave near the canyon wall. "That way, it's safe." Vaishari looked, then nodded. Slightly, just a small tilt of the head. Together, they moved toward the cave. She walked slowly, leaning gently on her good leg. Jonas walked beside her, carrying supplies. Inside, the cave was dry and deep. It smelled of old stone and moss. Jonas set up his small camp again, while Vaishari curled up near the wall. The storm hit hard that night. Rain poured down. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed. Vaishari flinched once at the sound, but Jonas stayed calm, warming his hands by the fire. She watched him in the glow. This small, fragile creature had no wings, no claws, no fire, but he was not afraid. He was not loud. He simply helped. And for the first time in many years, Vaishari felt something strange. Not just safety, not just peace. She felt seen. Over the next week, Vaishari's strength returned. Jonas adjusted her bandages every morning. He used a special human medicine nanogel, a healing fluid filled with tiny machines that helped repair skin and muscle. It was slow, but it worked. He also created a lightweight support brace for her wing, using parts from his broken speeder and soft fabric. It looked strange, but it helped her move. Vaishari began testing her movements, stretching, flexing her claws, beating her wings gently against the air. Jonas clapped his hands the first time she managed to glide for a few seconds. "That's it. You're getting there." Vaishari snorted softly, a sound close to amusement. Jonas laughed. Was that a laugh? I think it was. Each day they grew closer. Still, no words were spoken. But words were not needed. Jonas gave her something else, to a small, round device. He held it up and pressed a button. "This is a link beacon. If you ever need help, press this." He placed it gently on the ground in front of her. She stared at it and looked at him. "I don't know your name," he said, "but if you ever call, I'll come." One morning, Jonas received a message. His medical team was being moved to another planet. A sickness was spreading on a nearby mining colony, and they needed help fast. He packed his things and looked toward Vaishari, who now stood tall, her wounds nearly healed. "I have to go," he said quietly, "but you'll be fine now." She looked at him, her eyes soft but glowing. Then, slowly, she lowered her head and touched her snout to his chest, a gesture of trust. A sign of thanks. Jonas placed his hand gently on her jaw. "Take care, Snow Queen." He climbed onto a shuttle and flew away. Vaishari stood at the edge of the canyon, watching him vanish into the sky. For years, she had believed kindness didn't exist, that her life had no meaning. But now, something had changed, and deep inside her body, something else stirred. A warmth, a strange energy. She didn't know it yet, but the human's healing had awakened something inside her that had long been silent, something that would change the future of her kind forever. Vaishari stayed near the canyon long after Jonas had left. The air was quiet again. The stars above looked cold and distant, but they didn't seem as lonely as before. Every day, she tested her wing. It still hurt sometimes, but it was stronger. Now, she could stretch it fully and glide from rock to rock. She remembered the strange support brace the human had made. It didn't look like anything from her world, but it had helped her fly again. The healing was almost complete, but still, she didn't leave. There was something about the place where Jonas had helped her, something peaceful. His scent remained. In the cave, the small campfire ring he had built still sat near the wall. A few metal tools he left behind glinted in the sunlight. She had known many kinds of people, some who wanted power, some who wanted glory, and some who feared what they didn't understand. But Jonas was different. He had no armor, no weapons, no reason to care. And yet he had cared anyway. Days turned into weeks. Vaishari flew short distances now, circling the canyon, hunting small animals, drinking from clear pools. Her body was strong again, but deep inside, something new was growing. At first, she thought it was a side effect of the medicine, a warmth in her chest, a strange fluttering in her stomach. She ignored it, but it didn't stop. One night, as she rested under the stars, a soft humming came from the back of her throat. It was a melody, an old tune from her childhood. She hadn't sung in years. She had forgotten the feeling. She pressed a claw to the small device Jonas had given her, the beacon. It hadn't made a sound since he left, but she still kept it close. She didn't understand what had changed inside her, but she remembered something Jonas said before leaving. "If you ever call, I'll come." She wasn't ready to call yet, but one day she knew she would. Meanwhile, far away on a human space station, Jonas was busy with his work. He treated miners, travelers, and colonists who came in sick or hurt. He worked long hours and got little sleep. But even in the busiest moments, his thoughts returned to the quiet canyon and to the white dragon who had watched him with eyes full of pain, strength, and something deeper. He checked the beacon signal every night. It was always silent. His team didn't know much about what happened on HFY Prime. He didn't tell many people, only that he had helped a creature who no one else would. They nodded and moved on. But for Jonas, it was more than a memory. It was a connection. 1 month after Jonas had left, Vaishari took flight. Her wings were strong again. She soared across the clouds, high above the rocky lands of HFY Prime. Her scales gleamed in the sunlight, and her shadow swept across the forest below. She flew back to her old homeland. The sky-born cities floated in the sky, built on giant rock platforms held up by magnetic fields. The towers were tall, and the windposts between them were still guarded. As she approached, the guards saw her and raised their weapons. "It's the Hollow One," one whispered. "She returns," said another. "Why?" But they did not fire. Her power was clear. She could easily burn them from the sky. Veshari flew low over the city. She saw her old home, now broken and empty. She saw others, females with young ones, males training the youth, all living the life she was denied. No one came forward to greet her. No one offered respect. She turned away and flew back into the mountains. But she was not the same dragon who had left years ago. Back in her canyon, the changes inside her had become stronger. Her skin itched with energy. Her belly glowed softly at night. Her body was warm, almost humming. And then, one morning, she knew. She was no longer infertile. The impossible had happened. She was carrying life. Veshari stood at the edge of the canyon, looking toward the stars. She didn't understand how it was possible, but she remembered what Jonas had used on her, the nanogul, the medical salves, the human machines that worked differently from anything her kind had ever used. Perhaps it was a rare reaction, a miracle, or maybe it was something more, something her people had never tried before. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was this: she was no longer alone in the world. One night, clouds covered the sky. The wind howled through the trees, and in the silence of the cave, the tiny heartbeats moved inside Veshari. She curled up, wrapping her wings around herself. Her thoughts went to Jonas again. She pressed the beacon. It blinked once, then again. Far away. Jonas saw the alert on his monitor. The small device lit up, glowing softly. He stared at it for a long time. Then he smiled. She called. He packed his things once more, boarded a small ship, and headed back to the place where it had all begun. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew one thing for sure: he had never truly left. Veshari stood on the high cliff. Her wings stretched wide as the wind brushed against her pale scales. Below her, the canyon was quiet, and the two glowing eggs inside the cave pulsed softly with life. But the sky was not quiet anymore. Something had changed. She felt it deep inside, an old instinct, born from centuries of survival. Danger was near. Beside her, Jonas stared at the blinking light on his wrist device. Energy signals, not natural. He said softly, "Something is coming." Veshari growled low, her red eyes scanning the clouds. She could already smell the air. It was thick and strange, like smoke mixed with cold metal. Then they appeared. Dark shapes moved across the sky, small at first, but growing fast. Insect-like ships, their wings buzzed like angry wasps. Their bodies were black with sharp legs folded underneath. The Thresk had arrived. These creatures were known across distant star systems. They didn't attack with warships or bombs. They attacked with hunger. They stole energy, invaded nests, and used other species to grow their swarm. They had found Veshari's canyon. They had come for her eggs. Jonas stepped back, eyes wide. "We need help." Veshari didn't wait. With one strong leap, she launched. Into the sky, the first wave of Thresk drones swarmed toward her. Veshari twisted through them with power and grace. Her tail slammed into one, sending it crashing to the ground. Another flew at her with sharp pincers, but she blasted it with white-hot fire. She had always been strong, but now she had a reason to fight harder than ever before. She was protecting her children. Jonas ran to the cave. He activated a protective field over the nest using one of his devices. It wasn't built for dragons, but it could at least slow down the attackers. He sent an emergency message to the human command base: "Alien mother under attack. Rare life form. Requesting immediate support." He didn't know if they would come, but he had to try. Then he looked up. Veshari was still fighting, but the swarm was growing. In the floating cities of the skyborn far above, elders watched the same sky. A young scout dragon flew into the council chamber. The albino one, he said, breathless. She fights the Thresk, alone. But she is not alone. The council elders looked at one another in silence. The hollow one. One muttered no, said the elder leader slowly. She was hollow. Now she fights to protect life. They had ignored her and cast her out. But now, Vaishari was standing between destruction and survival. We must go, the elders said. Now, back in the canyon, Vaishari began to tire. The sky was thick with smoke. Her scales were scratched, and her wing ached. Suddenly, 3 drones flew straight toward the cave. Jonas aimed a flare gun, his only weapon, and fired. The flare hit one, sending it spinning, but the others kept coming. Just before they reached the entrance, a giant shadow dropped from above. It was another dragon, gold-scaled and massive. Then two more followed, dark blue and silver. The Skyborn had returned. The sky above the canyon became a battlefield. Dragons roared. Wings clashed. Fire lit up the clouds. The Thresk were fierce, but the Skyborn were fiercer. And in the middle of them all, Vaishari fought like a storm. Her white scales glowed in the firelight, and her cry echoed across the mountains. For the first time, the Skyborn fought beside the one they had once rejected. They didn't call her Hollow anymore. They called her Queen. On the ground, Jonas worked quickly to keep the energy field over the eggs strong. His hands moved fast, connecting wires, fixing broken circuits. His heart raced, but his mind stayed calm. One drone broke through and landed near the entrance. Jonas turned, ready to defend the eggs with his body if needed. But before it could strike, Vaishari landed hard beside it. She crushed the drone with her claw and stood between Jonas and the cave. She looked down at him. He nodded once, and she flew back into battle. After an hour of fighting, the last of the Thresk drones fell from the sky. Some crashed into the cliffs, others burned in the trees. The sky was quiet again, but now filled with smoke and glowing embers. The Skyborn circled above. Tired but proud, Vaishari landed slowly, her breath heavy, her body covered in bruises. Jonas ran to her, scanning her for injuries. "You're alive," he said, relief in his voice. She lowered her head and let him check her wing. Behind them, the Skyborn landed one by one. Elders, scouts, and warriors. They stood before Vaishari. One elder stepped forward. "We were wrong," he said. "You have done what none of us could. You fought not only for your own life, but for the lives of those yet to be born." Another added, "Your children may carry the strength of both worlds." Vaishari looked at Jonas. The elders followed her gaze. "You," one said to Jonas, "you helped her." Jonas smiled. "I just did what any decent person should." "No," the elders said, "you did more. You changed everything." That night, the Skyborn built a large ring of flame around the canyon, an ancient sign of respect for new life. The dragons sang songs, deep and powerful, echoing through the mountains. Vaishari curled up around her eggs, now safe again. Her wounds were healing, her spirit strong. Jonas sat nearby, watching the firelight dance across the sky. The outcast had become a queen. The impossible had become real. And the bond between human and dragon had changed the future of two worlds. The sun rose gently over the cliffs of HFY Prime, casting warm light across the canyon. The battle with the Thresk had ended, but signs of the fight remained: burned trees, broken rocks, and silent wreckage from fallen drones. At the center of it all, Vaishari stood tall. She was bruised, her wings scraped, but her eyes were clear. Around her, the Skyborn gathered in silence, honoring her strength and courage. Even the oldest among them looked at her with new respect, and in the middle of the cave, her two glowing eggs rested safely, still untouched, still full of life. Not far away, Jonas adjusted his gear. His communication device buzzed softly, and a message came through from Human Command. "We received your alert. What is the situation?" Jonas replied calmly. "Hostile species repelled with help from local ally. Unusual life forms protected. Requesting immediate support, medical and diplomatic." He looked up at the Skyborn watching him. This moment could change everything. he whispered to himself, and Human Command agreed. Just 2 days later, a human vessel entered the atmosphere of Ashvara Prime. It wasn't a warship. It was a medical and diplomacy cruiser painted white with blue markings. It carried supplies, doctors, translators, and representatives. They landed carefully near the canyon, where Skyborn guards stood watch. Jonas greeted them. "Be respectful," he said. "You're entering sacred ground." The human team followed him with quiet steps, and then they saw her Veshari, the albino dragon, the once rejected queen. She sat near the cave entrance, wings folded, eyes glowing with strength and calm. Her head turned slightly as the humans arrived. None of them had ever seen anything like her. And yet, she didn't feel like a monster. She felt like something. Noble. Jonas stepped forward first. "She's the one I treated months ago." He explained to the human team. "She was infertile. Her people cast her out, but something in our treatment changed her. Now she's carrying the future of her species." The lead diplomat, a kind woman named Mira, bowed her head respectfully. "Then we come as friends," Mira said softly. Veshari watched them, silent but alert. Jonas walked up to her and placed a hand gently on her front leg. "They're here to help, just like I did." After a long pause, Veshari lowered her head slightly in return. That day, something historic happened. The Skyborn elders agreed to sit with human leaders around a circle of smooth stones near the cave. There were no weapons, no loud arguments, only quiet talk, shared food, and slow trust. Through a translator drone, the elders spoke. "We once believed humans were too small to understand our ways," one said. "But this one," he nodded toward Jonas, "saw what we could not," another elder added. "His care brought life to one we had abandoned. That is not weakness. That is wisdom." Mira responded with a gentle smile. "We only wish to learn and grow together." And so began the first true alliance between humans and Skyborn. Over the next week, both sides worked together. Human engineers helped clean up the wreckage left by the Thresk. Skyborn scouts showed humans safe paths through the mountains. Medical teams examined the eggs under Veshari's watchful eye, confirming their healthy growth. News spread across the stars. Photos of Veshari and her eggs were shared through peaceful channels. Not as a threat, but as a miracle. People on distant planets saw her not as a beast, but as a symbol of healing, strength, and hope. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, Jonas sat by the fire, staring up in silence. Veshari was nearby, guarding her nest. "You know," Jonas said softly, "all this started with a simple decision. I saw someone hurt, and I chose to help." He looked over at her. "That's all it took." Veshari made a deep, quiet sound, something between a hum and a breath. She remembered that moment. She remembered lying broken in the canyon. She remembered the small human who didn't run away. And now, everything had changed. The Skyborn gave Jonas a name in their language, Scalebinder. It meant the one who connects worlds. They offered him a permanent place among them as their first human ambassador. But Jonas politely shook his head. "I'm not a leader," he said. "I'm just someone who helps." Still, they built him a small shelter near the cave, a place where he could stay, visit, and watch the miracle he helped create. And sometimes, Veshari would land beside his shelter in the evening, just to sit silently with him and watch them. Stars, but not everything was peaceful. Far beyond Ashvara Prime, the Thresk had heard of their loss. Their scouts had failed. Their attempt to steal the dragon eggs had been defeated. Now, their leaders planned something bigger. Stronger. Darker. They wouldn't give up so easily. They would return. And this time, they wouldn't come quietly. But Ashvara Prime was not the same planet it had been. The Skyborn were united again. Humans were no longer strangers. And standing at the center of this new alliance was Veshari, Queen of the Skyborn, mother of a new future, and guardian of the bond between two species. Jonas knew that challenges would come, but he also knew something else. They would face them together. And in that truth, there was strength. Not just for dragons, not just for humans, but for the galaxy. The stars above Ashvara Prime shone brighter than ever. The battle was over, but a new story was just beginning. Vaishari stood tall on a high cliff, her wings wide and strong. Beside her, 2 young dragons had hatched from the glowing eggs. Their scales shimmered, one with soft silver, the other with pale blue. They were the first of a new generation, born from hope, care, and courage. Jonas watched them from below. He smiled, feeling a quiet pride. This was more than he ever expected when he first found Vaishari broken and alone. The Skyborn city had changed. The floating platforms were now alive with new energy. Humans and dragons worked side by side, building schools, healing centers, and communication towers. The ancient distrust had turned to friendship. Vaishari was no longer an outcast. She was their queen, their protector, and their mother. But she had learned to trust others too, especially Jonas. Their bond was strong, built on respect, patience, and shared struggle. They understood each other without many words. One day, the peace was broken by a sudden warning. Scouts flew in with urgent news. The Thresk are coming back. Larger fleet, more dangerous. Vaishari's eyes flashed. The time for preparation had come. Jonas stood beside her, calm but ready. We have new allies now. We won't face them alone. The Thresk arrived in a massive swarm. Dark ships covered the sky like a storm cloud. Their sharp legs clicked, and their wings buzzed in a terrible sound. But this time, the defenders were ready. Skyborn dragons soared through the air, weaving among the ships. Humans fired energy beams from their bases and ships. Together, they fought fiercely. Vaishari led the charge. Her white scales glowed brighter than ever as she breathed fire that lit up the dark sky. Her young ones flew close, learning the ways of battle from their mother. The fight was long and hard, but the strength of unity showed itself. The Thresk fleet weakened, their numbers falling. The bond between humans and Skyborn was stronger than any swarm. Finally, the Thresk were forced to retreat, their terrible buzz fading into the distance. Cheers rose from the defenders below. Vaishari landed, tired but proud. Jonas hugged her gently. You saved your home. She looked at him with soft eyes. We saved it, together. In the quiet that followed, peace returned once more. The new generation of Skyborn dragons grew strong, healthy, and wise. The humans taught them about distant stars and science. The dragons shared ancient knowledge of the skies and survival. Vaishari's children grew under the care of both species. They were symbols of hope, of change, of a future where differences were strength. Years passed. Jonas became a leader not because he wanted power, but because people trusted him. He traveled between planets, sharing the story of the albino dragon queen who had changed the course of history. And everywhere he went, he spoke of one truth: kindness and courage can change the impossible. Vaishari and Jonas stood together on a cliff overlooking a bright horizon. Do you think this is just the beginning? Jonas asked. Vaishari stretched her wings toward the rising sun. It is the future, ours to protect, ours to grow. They looked at the sky where dragons soared and ships flew side by side. A new age had begun, an age where hope, friendship, and courage ruled the stars. The story of the infertile albino dragon who was rejected became a legend. But it was more than legend. It was a truth, a reminder that even the most unlikely heroes can change the world. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to care, one person to believe, one person to stand with another no matter how different they are. The future was theirs, and they would face it together. Far away in the galaxy, on a cold planet called Drovither, lived a proud alien species known as the Droviths. They looked like great winged dragons, covered in strong scales and blessed with sharp minds. These creatures ruled their world with traditions that were old and strict. Among them, strength and the ability to produce children were everything. In this world, there was one dragon female named Vezra. She was different from the others. Her body was tall and strong. Her scales were smooth and pure white, shining like frozen snow. Her eyes were silver, and her wings stretched longer than any Drovith female before her. Many believed she would one day lead her kind in battle. perhaps even rise to the high circle a group of Droveth leaders. But Vezra had a secret. Though she was powerful and smart, she could not lay eggs. For a Droveth female, this was seen as a deep failure. Her people believed that the future of their kind depended on strong children, and if a female could not produce young ones, they said she had no future. Vezra tried many times to prove her worth in other ways. She won battles against rival clans. She saved her group from ice storms and rock slides. She brought back rare stones and hunted dangerous beasts to show her value. But none of that mattered. When she reached her final season of testing, the truth was confirmed. The Droveth healers spoke in front of the high circle. She is strong in body and sharp in mind. The elders said, but her line will end with her. Whispers filled the air. Some turned their heads, others looked away. The leader of the circle, a male with dark gray wings named Zuther, stepped forward. Then she is not fit for the future of our kind. Strength without legacy is a broken blade. She must be sent into exile. Vezra did not cry. Droveths never cried in front of others. But her wings drooped, and her heart felt heavy. Without a word, she spread her wings and flew away. No one followed. No one said goodbye. She traveled for days, far from her old home, through storms and frozen winds. She crossed mountains and deep valleys. Finally, she reached a lonely place called Lurk-9, a frozen moon with ice-covered canyons and no cities. It was a place for those who were forgotten. Vezra made her home inside a deep cave in the mountains. Inside the cave, she built a nest from flamestone's rocks that gave off gentle heat. She hunted snow wolves and sharp beaks to eat. She slept under the stars, alone and silent. Time passed, years, maybe more. She did not speak. She did not roar. The fire in her chest that once made her feared by many had faded. Now, she only flew when she needed to hunt. Sometimes she watched the sky, wondering if her kind ever thought of her. But she knew the truth. They had forgotten her. One day, as she rested near her cave, she saw something fall from the sky. A bright flash crossed the clouds, followed by a loud noise. A ship, small and damaged, was falling fast. Vezra stood and narrowed her eyes. It crashed somewhere not far from her home. At first, she thought about ignoring it. Ships sometimes crashed on Lurk-9, and nothing good ever came from them. But a strange feeling pulled at her. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the silence she had grown tired of. She flew toward the smoke. She landed carefully near the crash. The ship was half buried in snow and rock. Parts of it were broken, and fire flickered from one side. She smelled fuel and metal, but also something else. Something warm, something alive. Inside the wreck, lying on the floor, was a creature she had never seen before. Small compared to her. Thin arms, soft skin, a strange cloth wrapped around its body. Blood marked its face, and its eyes were closed. It was a human. She had heard of humans in old tales from space travelers, curious beings, fragile, but smart. They explored the stars and helped other species. But Vezra had never met one. She stepped closer. The human did not move. She looked at him carefully. His chest moved slowly. He was breathing, alive. She could have left him there. It was not her problem. The strong survived. The weak were forgotten. That was the Droveth way. But she was no longer one of them, and he was like her alone. With her strong claws, she carefully reached inside and lifted the human out. He was light, like lifting a young-winged beast. She carried him through the snow, back to her cave. Inside, she placed him near the flame stones and watched him. His face was pale. His lips were dry. He breathed in sharp gasps. He was hurt. He would die soon. Vezra looked at him. Something deep inside her stirred. A memory, maybe, or a feeling she hadn't known in years. She remembered how it felt to be left behind, to be hurt and alone, to be unwanted. And slowly, without knowing why, she pushed one of the warm stones closer to him. She covered him with soft furs from her last hunt. Then she sat beside him and waited. Outside, the cold winds howled. But inside the cave, something had changed. For the first time in years, Vezra was not alone.